Mr. O'Rourke, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. So to the Ranking Member's point, one of the benefits of having a little bit more deliberation on this is ensuring that we all have the facts to make informed decisions. To a person, we want accountability. You've been saying that since I first got on this committee, Chairman Rowe, and I thank you for it, and you're doing your best to act on that, and for that I'm grateful. But if our goal is to serve the veterans and to make sure that we have great access, timely care, and quality outcomes, I want to understand how this contributes to that. For example, how many VA employees are chewing up 350 days in a process that is preventing them from getting out of the way and putting another good employee in so that they can deliver service. If it's, you know, a critical number, I think that helps to make your case. On the other side, the way I understand it today, what your bill would change is that if my supervisor wants to fire me, I can now go to my AFGE rep. That rep can work with my supervisor to see if there are any issues that they can resolve together. And if they can't, then I go back through the process and I'm removed. If they can, perhaps there's a training issue, perhaps there's something else that's not working in the section that I'm in that gets resolved. I go back to work and I improve outcomes for veterans. I'd love to know how often that has taken place. So having the facts and the information and the data upon which to make an informed decision, instead of, you know, in my case, not speaking for anybody else, saying, look, folks, I voted for accountability, mission accomplished, I'm on my way. I really want to know the impact that this is likely to have. You're going to gain a supporter if you can help me understand the underlying case from the numbers and the data. My concern is that when we looked at the high-profile accountability problems within the VA, a $600 million hospital that's now $1.7 billion, not a single person was fired, and those responsible allowed to keep their pensions and to retire. I don't think those were frontline employees. I don't think those were bargaining unit employees. By and large, could be wrong. My understanding is that those were decisions made at a more senior level for which people were not held accountable. Absolutely unacceptable. I want to make sure that we do a better job of that. If this bill does that, prevents an Aurora, Colorado, and ensures that we deliver better care, better outcomes at a lower cost to the taxpayer, sign me up. But to date, I don't have that, and I do have concerns that we may be removing processes that improve outcomes for veterans, and so I'm not willing to sacrifice that. When we have a bipartisan bill that I think many of us I voted for, again, didn't make the AFGE people back in El Paso happy. I could care less. I want to make sure that I'm making the veterans in El Paso happy. But I voted for it because it was a way for you and I to agree on accountability that also had Senate sponsorship. My understanding is that Mr. Walz is offering something that would get us back to that bipartisan, tough but fair compromise that allows us to move forward on accountability. I just would ask, I'd hope that the two of you can work together to do that. That's something that would have, I can't speak for my colleagues, that would have my support. You'd have a lot of Democrats with you on that. And so I don't know if you want to answer or your team would like to answer any of the underlying fact-based questions about what this will do and just how extensive the problem is beyond anecdote. And so I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding in your comments. I don't think just a couple of things. One, I don't believe that the VA is firing too many people. I haven't seen a scandal about that where you see all these people getting fired. They're not. The problem is, here's a couple of examples we've received from VA that speak to the fact that not closing this loophole will make our intentions with the underlying bill null and void, and that's why veterans will not see any changes from the status quo. At one VA facility, an employee was indefinitely suspended pending resolution of criminal proceedings related to her participation in an armed robbery. She grieved the indefinite suspension rather than appealing it to the MSPB. The grievance was settled between her and her union representative and the VA in an arrangement that allowed her to return to work. A later removal of this same employee was also grieved and mitigated down to a suspension based on union intervention. She continued to have attendance problems, so a new removal action was effected on January 23, 2017. She has since grieved that action, and the union has invoked arbitration. I should note that looking at the numbers of arbitrations, it can last more than 264 days. Here's another timely example following our O&I subcommittee hearing last week on drug diversion within VA. At another VA facility, a pharmacy tech diverted leftover fentanyl rather than destroying it. A removal of this employee was proposed, which the employee and their union representative grieved, and management, under pressure from the union at the facility, agreed to withdraw the removal and issued a last chance agreement instead. This individual is still a VA employee. Anyone else wish to comment?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I believe the fentanyl issue was in Colorado, and in fact, that individual was caught in the operating room shooting up fentanyl that the individual had stolen from the VA and was, in fact, not fired under current personnel rules. As to, I think, the situation in Aurora, Colorado, this committee did press the FBI to look into Mr. Hagstrom criminally because he had lied repeatedly under oath before this committee. And the FBI did, in fact, refer charges, criminal charges, to the Justice Department under the prior administration, and no action has been taken. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman for yielding.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Takano, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to remind the committee about a report back from the Commission on Care, which we established through the Choice Act. Both the Republican and Democratic appoint the co-chairs of the commission. When asked by some members of the committee about why more folks hadn't been fired, both pushed back. Both of the co-chairs were respected leaders of private sector health care organizations, and they both reported on their amazement about how little supported and how neglected the personnel function of the VA was. And what they were referring to is they said, look, we cannot, in the private sector, fire our way to excellence. There is a distinction between somebody who is egregiously incompetent, not doing their job, and people who are not trained well. I can tell you that they were concerned that what I recall from that testimony was that managers are not sufficiently trained to do progressive discipline, to keep the proper records. It is very possible to dismiss federal service, civil service employees. My concern is that, the Phoenix scandal came to light because there were whistleblowers, there were people on the front line who told truth to power, who were not intimidated by senior managers who had overwhelming amounts of power to intimidate them from being able to tell the truth. And my fear is that unless we do this right, we're going to create an accountability system which empowers the very people who need to be checked. Namely, senior managers who seem to get off scot-free from doing very incompetent things. And it's the ability of the line workers we want to protect to be able to tell truth to power in a way that doesn't disrupt the ability of a VISN or a VA center to get its mission done. But in a well-balanced workplace where people are respected, I think there's a far better outcome. And I think that's what the message of the two co-chairs of the Commission on Care was to this committee. And I wish we could bring those individuals back and work together, and along with all the other stakeholders, and work together on a real accountability plan. Bring out AFG into it. Let's get together and look at how we can do accountability right. And I just am not comfortable with the bill before it. I support Mr. Walz's amendment.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Any other comments? Any further discussion on the amendment? Ms. Esty, you're recognized.
I'm highly supportive of accountability in all across the veterans organizations and all of the VA facilities. We've got a 5-star rating in Connecticut, but it is not universally good, and I hear about it every time something doesn't go right. This is, again, an area where we have agreement. I think the concern, a number of us that you're hearing from a number of us, and again, I'm new to the committee, is I would like to be able to press more on, for example, how this works to ensure that whistleblowers don't end up getting suppressed under the proposal that you've got. If we had a hearing, I'd be able to get a better understanding of how on the ground that works. How is this going to support and ensure that SES members who are making those decisions are held to account? They've got a lot of power. If the issue is they're not being properly trained, they don't know how to fire people, then train them what civil service allows them to do in firing. But I think, again, there are a lot of new members to this committee. There are a lot of new members in Congress. I think the due diligence that we need to do in regular order in committee would be helpful. I know to me is new to this committee, and drilling down, as I think it would to other members of the committee, and again, allow us to go forward in a bipartisan way, which as I think we should. I'm being deprived of that opportunity to support you today because we don't have a hearing, and I can't get those questions answered because I don't have the people on the line, the SES folks, here to assure my concerns. And I would like to be able to support because I'm highly supportive of the accountability. I have too many questions to do that right now. I believe that a hearing would allow us to do that, fashion a bipartisan proposal that we could all agree on that would hold a lot of sway, not only with our colleagues in the House, but with our colleagues in the Senate as well, and get this done as soon as possible. Thank you, and with that, I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding. Any further comments? Any more discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, the question now occurs on Mr. Wallace's amendment to H.R. 1259. All those in favor of the amendment to H.R. 1259 say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. In opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment to H.R. 1259 is not agreed to.